Welcome to the 11th episode of SteeleWatching, which is a podcast for Remington Steele fans. My name is Sara, and I'm one of the hosts.
And I'm some guy that walked in off the street named Eric. And I'm going to pretend to be another host.
Yeah, sure, why not? That's kind of how the show works, right? Somebody pretends to know what they're doing, and we all go with it. So
yeah, okay, great.
Now that we've got that established.
Yes, we're nuts.
We are going to be talking about the episode Stealing the Show. And this one first aired on January 7th, 1983, so we are in a new year. And it was written by Peter Lefcourt and directed by Seymour Robbie. So for this one, I decided to go with the TV Guide listing.
Okay.
And it read, "A long-buried Hollywood scandal is unearthed when one of its has-beens who thinks someone's trying to kill her convinces Laura and Steele that she may be right." So, pretty good TV Guide listing synopsis, I thought.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. I had a couple
Comes
overall
to us by way of
thoughts.
Judith Moose's book.
Yes, exactly.
So, yes.
Insert plug.
Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, it's all good. Yeah, so I had some overall thoughts about before getting into the episode specifically.
Okay.
First, this is the halfway mark of the season. Whether or not this was the right production order, I don't know, but this is kind of the show has really started to find its footing at this point. And I think this episode is a bit of a mission statement, in that regard. The entire show so far has been kind of a love letter to old Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
And this episode kind of makes that very explicit. Thoughts on that?
Yes, you are correct. And oops, I'm on the wrong screen. Dang it! Where's my mouse? My cursor? Oh.
This is what happens when you get a flashy front man to be the host.
That's right. Except I'm not flashy, and I'm using multiple screens, and I always have a problem with multiple screens. There was an opportunity I thought that kind of got missed.
Ooh.
And maybe it wasn't necessarily an opportunity for this episode, although I think it could have been done that way. And this is another one of those, how did you get from here to there things that I do from time to time.
The ADHD brain, I know it well. I know it well.
Because as I was watching this again, it made me think of a Murder, She Wrote episode called The Days Dwindle Down. It was season 3, episode 21 of Murder, She Wrote. And in this Murder, She Wrote episode, it's a direct sequel to the events of a 1949 movie called Strange Bargain. And the episode actually used footage from the film in the episode. And the main characters or several of the main characters from the movie reprised their characters in this Murder, She Wrote episode. And like I said, as I was watching this Steele episode, it reminded me of that. And I'm not sure why, because like I said, rabbit hole, trail, whatever. I got from A to B to Z in a hurry. But it seemed to me that this episode here had some opportunity to do something like that was missed. And there's other connections that could be made between this episode and old Hollywood. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead here real quick. There's a scene in Steele's apartment where
sure.
Veronica Kirk is acting out scenes to her movies. And then after she does this, they have this conversation and she says she'd played opposite of all the near and near greats. And she lists Kane Richmond, who in some places actually has his name misspelled, George Zuko.
I Googled him.
Sabu Dastigar. And there's an opportunity here because the actress playing Veronica Kirk never actually worked with these people in any of the films that she appeared in. And
I looked into that.
And I'm supposing that the script was probably written before her part was cast. So I kind of understand that. But how difficult would it have been done to do a quick rewrite to actually list actors and or actresses that she actually worked with herself? And then there were also some movie references where Veronica Kirk appeared in these movies. It would have been great if they had actually referenced movies that this actress, and I got her name written down somewhere on my notes, and I'm not finding it right here real quick.
Phoebe Osterwald, something like that?
Yes, thank you. But they could have referenced movies that she actually appeared in, and that would have tied it into this whole Hollywood connection thing, old Hollywood, old
Yeah.
movies thing, so nicely. I think it was a missed opportunity. And it's a shame. I
I
understand
think,
that.
it might have been rights. I don't know. Would it have been rights? I mean, you can mention movies without.
Yeah. And see, that's the thing is I think they could have mentioned them. Now, like the Murder, She Wrote episode, they would have had to have gotten clearance to use those pieces of film, which I imagine in the case of Murder, She Wrote, it was because it was probably owned by the same studio that did those movies. But yeah, I think this missed some great opportunities to do some real live character and movie tie-ins to the actual actress, because she was old Hollywood. Now, she was never a headline name to speak of, like some of the other characters that she mentioned.
Her.
Yeah. But, that would have been in even another tie-in right there, that she was kind of a B movie actress, and they could have made all these connections to real things that she did. So missed opportunity, I think. But I understand, pressures of Hollywood, time constraints, not knowing necessarily who was going to be cast, and it just slipped through. And but it's a shame.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's funny, speaking of old Hollywood, and this ties into what you were just saying, the last episode that we recorded, I had intended to mention the passing of 2 stars that were really well known in Hollywood. And one was the incredible Dame Angela Lansbury, who it feels like Murder, She Wrote has come up a couple of times now in this podcast. And I feel like it's good to mention her name in this episode because you've just pointed out an episode of Murder, She Wrote that tied into old Hollywood. And Lansbury was an older actress in a crime series, which was pretty much unheard of at the time for a woman. And so in the way that Remington Steele was breaking down some of the barriers.
Not just for a woman, but a woman of her age. I mean, we'd had older male detectives in the past, but never an older female detective.
Yeah. She was really pioneering, and she used her role and her pull in Hollywood to give older actors guest spots on her show so that they could keep their SAG cards and their insurance, which
keep working.
Was pretty awesome.
Making some money, paying the bills, putting food in their mouth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is pretty, because Hollywood at that time, if you were older, you either played the grandparent or you weren't hired. Like, it was just, there were only so many roles for you, and those roles were very limited. So, the other actress I wanted to mention that passed away recently was Louise Fletcher, who was known for a number of roles. Kai Wynn from Deep Space Nine, the character we all love to hate, but also for playing the aforementioned Nurse Ratched in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which Steele referenced in the last episode that we recorded. Correct. So R.I.P. Louise Fletcher and Dame Angela Lansbury, because they were 2 really incredible actresses. And they did a lot of really good stuff. And the second thing I wanted to mention, notable guest, speaking of notable guest stars, Peter Jurasik, who was in this episode playing Phil Haver. And we also know he was in the the Christmas episode that comes later. Spoilers, comes later in the series playing Eggnog.
No.
Sorry. But sci-fi fans will know him as Londo Mollari in Babylon 5. And he is an absolutely incredible actor. So I just wanted to say, yay, Peter Jurasik, because I love seeing him in things. So there's the stuff at the top. But then the other thing I wanted to talk about are just B movies in general, and just do a quick sort of overview on what B movies are and where the term comes from, because I assume most of the people listening know, but buzz. But they basically came out of, you've got the Silent Age of film, which was essentially a byproduct of vaudeville, right? You've got vaudeville, which was all these live acts that were almost circus-like in nature, and pretty much anybody could go and see a vaudevillian act. And then when silent movies came in, they were very similar in that there would often be live acts that preceded them, as well as a live orchestra, and that orchestral performance would accompany the film. So obviously when we see silent movies now, they have a score accompanying it, but that wouldn't have been there when you attended the film. It would have been an actual orchestra performing it. And people would go dressed to the nines. This was, you'd be in top coats and tails, and it became somewhat of a big night out. And then when sound came in, the studios began losing money because the movies had these extravagant budgets. There was a new programming scheme that they sort of developed that eventually became standard, which was a newsreel, a short or serial, cartoon, followed by a double feature, which to me seems like a lot of time sitting in a chair, but that's what people wanted. That's what they paid for. So the second feature.
Well, again, it was kind of an event.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like you were getting more, right? And the first film generally cost a lot less, as Steele says in the episode, and it usually featured up-and-coming actors rather than established stars. So there was that. But the other thing that I don't think a lot of people know about was the practice of road showing, which was the policy of a main event film only being allowed to be screened in one area at a time rather than simultaneously in all theaters like it happens now, right? A movie gets released now and it's everywhere, whereas back then it was like there was one select area that had a hold on that theater until they released it. So typically a top feature would play in its second run at a smaller downtown theater and then steadily move outward into the suburbs and the rural communities, taking upwards of 6 months to complete its run. So the second lower budget film on the bill kind of allowed for a bit of a balance and ensured that there was something of interest being offered to the audience. And this kind of became like regular practice during Hollywood's golden age. So I thought it was interesting just to it's my brief history of cinema lesson.
Thank you for this episode of...
But, and it's funny
Remington Steele, your educational program. Thank you and goodbye.
I took a course in university. Can you tell? But it still sort of exists if you've got a drive-in theater near you. Mm-hmm. It's usually a double feature. I don't know. Do you have drive-in theaters in Alaska? Well, probably not. It's probably too cold.
Well, there used to be drive-in theaters up here, but no more.
Did there?
Yeah.
See, there's a few in Ontario, and there's one really close to us. So we go every summer. And I believe it's still open. Like they pretty much leave it open until snow starts to fall and then they close it for, the winter season and reopen it. So those always have a double feature. I'm going to admit, I usually only go if the first movie's interesting and I leave because I'm old and I'm tired. But it's true. And then if it's a long weekend, you'll get a triple feature. So kind of like a feeling of like, this is what it would have been like. They even have like those old timey commercials that they play at the drive-in to, I guess, make it an experience. There's one that's for a pickle that's really weird, but anyway, yeah, totally not related to the episode.
Yeah, so. we have an old indoor theater now, but it used to be a drive-in theater and the screen isn't there, but the projection room still is, or the projection building.
Oh, interesting.
So they've got this separate building that was for the projection system, and then when they converted from a drive-in to an indoor, they just left that and built this new indoor theater. So yeah, we used to have them up here.
Last question. Do you know what the first film was that ended road showing?
I had never even heard of road showing until you explained it. So
This was new, huh?
No clue.
It was Jaws. Jaws was the first film to end road showing, and it not only premiered in like 400 theaters simultaneously, but it was also the first film to use television to advertise, to kind of get an audience. They realized that most people at that point had TVs, so they might as well show ads for the film. So, yeah.
Interesting. Did not know that.
That would have been like, I think, 1977.
Boom, boom,
yeah.
boom, boom, boom.
Anyway, on to the episode. And I mean, there's a bit of suspense in the first scene. We've got this, stately mansion. We hear a scream. Light turns on. We've got an old lady. Well, we know it's Veronica Kirk, but she's screaming. She's running. She falls down the stairs. I gotta applaud her athleticism.
Yeah.
If this is something that she's doing as, like she's falling down she's not a young woman.
Well,
so
the falling part, the falling down the stairs part was a stunt double, I'm sure. But yeah, there's
absolutely.
There was other parts of that was her that, took a little bit of physical exertion. So yeah.
For sure. And she's followed by her daughter, an older gentleman. She runs out the door screaming, "They won't get me, not tonight." And then, of course, we switch over to Laura, who is taking on Veronica Kirk's daughter, Jennifer, as a client.
Let's jump back just a second.
Sure.
Let's just jump back a second. So there's multiple gunshots, and the daughter and Mickey Prentice, who we find out his name later, come out, and Prentice, the butler, says, "She's at it again." Well, first of all, did no one else in the house hear the gunshots? I mean, to say she's at it again, this kind of implies that she's acting out. She's misbehaving. She's off of a rocker. But did no one hear the gunshots? Or is he saying, well, okay, she's got a gun and she's going around shooting up the house again? I don't know. I'm confused, but it's, to me, it was like one of those, I didn't hear those gunshots. I didn't hear those gunshots. I didn't hear those gunshots. It makes no sense to me.
It also makes you wonder, are they the only people in the house? Like, surely there would be other people. A house that big, you would think would have staff. But I guess maybe not. Maybe if they do, it's only during the day. Because otherwise, that is a huge house for like 3 people to be living in.
Well, people do it. I mean, but yeah, it's a lot to keep clean. Yeah. That's for sure. For just Mickey.
It is. And you're right. Like if there's gunshots, they'd be going, hey, wait a minute. Like, where did those gunshots come from? Oh, wow. She's clearly not crazy if there are actual gunshots.
Yes. Anyway, back up to where you were talking about.
That is Laura. A good point.
Laura and Jennifer.
So yeah, so I have some issues with this first scene too, because Laura is taking on Jennifer Kirk, who is saying that her mother is not all there, blah, 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 that she's an alcoholic, shut in, prone to senility and paranoia. Mm-hmm. And I would think Laura suggests calling the police. And Jennifer says, no, I don't want police involved. My mother is a 4-star loon. I would think that the police would be the first people you call if that's the case. If this is a case of dementia and senility and your elderly parent who is out there possibly hurting themselves, why not call the police? Like, I get that they are old Hollywood and there's already a scandal attached to them, but it seems like at this point people have largely forgotten them anyway. So it's not like it's bound to show up on the front page of the papers.
True. That is a good question. I guess from the standpoint of maybe just to try to avoid the possibility of publicity, especially since, as we find out later, that she's supposedly going to be starring in a brand new movie, which is itself another issue.
And Jennifer would have known that.
Yeah. And the fact that she's being taken advantage of by this guy. Yeah, it could just be that Jennifer doesn't want to risk the possibility of negative publicity. Of course, not for Veronica's sake, but for her own sake. She doesn't want to have to deal with it.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can come up with, because you're right. You would typically go to the police on something like that.
Yeah, because it's not even like it's something that, if she's not. Anyway, yeah, I think you're right. I think it's just, she knows that if there is a movie to come out, and she doesn't even know that Mickey is responsible for the scandal that got covered up in her childhood. She's totally unaware of that. So It's not even like she's trying to hide that part. But either way, Steele comes into the office. Bernice tries to prevent him from seeing the client. She attempts to compliment him by telling him the color, which is gray. So it's kind of funny that she's like, that's a lovely color. I'm like, well, it's technically a shade, but okay. Of his suit looks good. He obviously doesn't buy it. I love their little, can't you just let me have just one, And then he's like, what?
Laid it on a little thick, record? Did I?
So he goes in,
with a trowel.
Yep. But again, my question here being that why do you think Laura chose not to bring him in? I mean, she has been in the past. Is she either still angry about the situation in Steel Trap, or is this another situation of the episodes being maybe aired out of order, or just maybe the writers keeping up the bit and not recognizing there's a ping pong effect going on?
Well, I don't think it's order, because I think by this point we've gotten past most of the jumbled episodes. So I think this one is pretty much showing in the order that it was shot. I don't know why. Maybe it was a strategic move on her part simply because of who the client is. Or more specifically,
she didn't seem to know though. Like when Steele, he has to explain it to her.
Well, not really, because he comes in and Laura introduces him to Jennifer Kirk, and he makes his excuses and such. And Laura says, "Well, it seems that her mother Veronica is missing in the case." And Steele makes the connection, and Laura's response is, "You knew that Veronica Kirk was an actress?" So I think she knows who Veronica Kirk is. I think she's trying to prevent Steele from getting involved because he's going to go like he does, goes nuts over this great movie actress that, oh, I picked up his gum wrapper. Oh, it's so amazing.
I kind of got the impression that she didn't, or at least didn't know how prolific she was, because when he says she's the queen of the bees, Laura's like, buzz, buzz. Like, she doesn't really seem to know.
You might be right there. I think Laura did know she was an actress from old Hollywood, but I think you're right that she may not have realized the extent of her work and that she was the queen of the B movies and the person you hired when you needed somebody to die.
Well, like Sean Bean. You need someone to die in a movie, you get Sean Bean. Frankly, I'm surprised when he survives one.
Anyway, all right. So what's next?
I mean, Pierce Brosnan killed Sean Bean in Goldeneye. Anyway, so yeah, he makes the connection, as you said, he's totally starstruck. And Jennifer mentions that her mother is being talked into making another movie, but that she believes the man who is trying to talk her into it is a parasite who just wants to go after her money.
Mm-hmm.
The episode already kind of touches on the themes of ageism in Hollywood as well as the way like older people are treated by their kids when they reach a certain age.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like the statement is being made, or maybe not even a statement necessarily, but it's just sort of showing the way that we tend to patronize the elderly, as well as the way that some older stars can be taken advantage of. And the two that immediately come to mind are Nichelle Nichols, who was rumored to have been taken advantage of by her agent and forced into public appearances when she wasn't up to it, and Harper Lee, who wrote To Kill a Mockingbird and notoriously had no intention of publishing another novel after that, and then just before her death published it wasn't even a prequel, sequel. It was like sort of a sequel, but it was the first novel she had actually written, and then her agent rejected it and told her to take Scout and make her a kid, and that's how she wrote To Kill a Mockingbird. So I'm wondering if you got that same sort of impression that they were kind of like, again, I don't even think it was a statement because the show doesn't really make statements, but shining a light on some of these actors and stars that are kind of like, when they get to a certain age, either ignored or sometimes exploited.
Well, I think there is an element of that, to be certain. But I looked at it from the other perspective, that it was about a sleazy executive in Hollywood. I'll call him a producer. He really wasn't a producer because he really didn't produce anything except except money for himself. He's getting people to invest in these films, and then he finds a way to scuttle them. And as he says later on, he makes a fortune without rolling a foot of film. And all these people that have gotten involved with him just fall by the wayside, and they've been taken advantage of and basically robbed, so that this guy can make money by taking advantage of it. He's a con man in a three-piece business suit with a Hollywood card that says producer. And I think that's how I interpreted it, is that this was somebody's kind of a commentary about these types of people in Hollywood. But yeah, you're right. The people who are most often taken advantage of that are people who are trying to get into movies. And I'll say beyond just old people who have been has-beens or are has-beens in movies, but people who are trying to get in, I can make you a star. It'll cost you $10,000, but I'll get you, sorry, it just fell apart. But thanks for the money.
Yeah.
That's my take.
Yeah, that's true. Fair enough. And then we've got Steele. He follows Laura out into the other room. Laura fills him in even further. He tells her that she was one of the greats and that she died in more films than anyone else. And so, he's obviously in awe of her, wants to work the case. I like the fact that Laura, she says, she's skeptical. She asks if the mayor can spare him. Mm-hmm. What's he doing with the mayor? Like, are they sitting down talking policy? Is he... Also, why wouldn't she take him in on this one? It's clearly not only right up his alley, but he has more knowledge of old Hollywood than any of them.
Well, First of all, as far as the mayor, that's just the excuse he came up with, I think, in the moment to kind of justify him not being there up to this point. Oh, I'm sorry. You're such an important client.
Like ducked out of another.
Yeah, you're such an important client that I should have been here, but I was tied up with the mayor. You just don't tell the mayor no, because then people are forgiving. As far as why, I come back to the fact that she knew how he would react. And in fact, his line here, the thought of being a mere relative away from Veronica Kirk, it's like I kind of referenced earlier. Oh, I picked up his bubblegum wrapper. It's somebody who is just so obsessed and mentally gaga over somebody that there's no rational thought there. And in actuality, this case has nothing to do with movies at this point. Now, later on it does, but at this point,
well, true.
It's a missing person case. So why complicate it by bringing in Remington Steele, who's going to turn it into a fan?
Oh, I don't know.
Thing.
Kidnap an old lady.
He's going to go fanboy over it. So who needs the complication?
Yeah. Fair enough. I also kind of wondered why. I guess it makes some degree of sense, because when a client walks through the door, you take them at face value and you trust what they have to say. You kind of have to, but I feel like Jennifer Kirk from the jump does not feel trustworthy, and she doesn't seem to care much about her mother. She basically just seems more intent on getting her mother back under lock and key than she does really finding out much about her. So I don't know. I think I get why Laura trusts her, because you do until there's reason not to. But to me, I don't know if it's just because she's so unlikable that there's a part of me that goes, why are we trusting her so readily on what she says? She doesn't seem to care much about her mother at all.
Yeah, she's got a lot of very venomous things to say about her mother, even right here in the beginning. Now, you can say negative things about a family member, and you can do it in a way that isn't venomous. Even though you might feel venomous, you can put it in a way that comes across as, well, this is a problem. Here's why. But no, there was no holding back on this. There was no hiding the fact that she had nothing but contempt for her mother. So yeah, you're right. I mean, it's
4-star Lou.
Yeah. She has a medical problem. What is it? Tequila. So I mean, there's a lot of reasons to believe that things probably aren't quite the way they're being presented.
Sure. Yeah. So they go to see Phil Haver, who immediately assumes that they're actors, or specifically Steele, I think. And when he finds out who Steele is, he's tell my wife that I am having an affair, and then I'll send you pictures, which is kind of funny.
Kind of sleazy. But
and then he says he might know where Veronica is. He's super sleazy. Like, it's like they picked every cliche in the book and just put it in a blender and then spat him out, But, so he says he might know where Veronica is, but he's not going to tell them. And what strikes me here again is that Veronica is a grown woman. She is free to leave and do whatever she pleases, and yet nobody seems to be behaving that way, even though these people are horrible people. Phil Haver is an awful person. Jennifer is not a wonderful person. Like, she's not very likable, but this isn't a child that they're trying to find. This is a woman who is her own person. And, when Phil Haver goes into his rant about he did nothing wrong, he studied film, when he finally made it, it was because his father broke down and gave him a job. He tells them of his plan to make a movie where Veronica dies 3 times as 3 different characters, a queen of the Amazon, an anchor woman, and the mother of another character. And he also says that nostalgia sells. Do you think that's true? Like, are we seeing any new ideas, or, is it just the same? Like, I'm talking about now in 2022. Like, it seems like Phil might have known what was what, because to me, it feels like currently, with the exception of the odd, movie that comes out, Hollywood is basically strip mining my childhood for ideas.
The word of the day, reboot.
Yeah, reboot, requel, prequel, sequel, adaptation.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That's one of the things I've been unhappy about, I guess, with movies is that so
Mhm.
many of them are either direct reboots and badly done reboots in most
Yep.
cases, or they're
Oh, yeah,
remakes,
really badly.
they're really badly done remakes with some exceptions. Again, the
Yep.
previously mentioned Thomas Crown with Pierce Brosnan. That was a great remake.
Yeah.
But that was
a
the
good one.
exception.
It was
that was the rare.
fantastic.
Or they're the same story,
Yep.
just rewritten and things changed, like Avatar was Pocahontas, like the chapter 7 of
Avatar
Star
is
Wars, I don't
Dances
even
with
remember what it was
Ferngully.
called, chapter 7 something or other, was just
Yeah.
the original Star Wars redone, with more lens flare.
Yeah. Oh God, don't get me started on the lens flares.
J.J. Abrams. That man only knows.
I could rant for days on lens flares and J.J. Abrams.
Is there anything that he has done that is original? And this is relevant to what we're just talking about. Is there anything that he's done that has been original? No. Everything he has done has been a rewrite of something else or a reboot of something else.
It's always Hollywood's greatest hits.
Yes. Yep. And Phil Haver here, basically Queen of the Amazon tribe, mother of a corrupt politician, TV anchor movie. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a really bad movie. It sounds like a really bad TV movie.
Oh, yeah. It's terrible.
But no, this guy hasn't had an original thought since the day he was born, I'm sure. But
true.
Hopping back to the first part of your comments there, I hate to say it, but Haver may be the only one up to this point who is treating Veronica Kirk like an adult who has the right to make her own decisions. I know it's a terrible thing to say about this sleazebag.
No, I agree. I agree.
She has the right to make her own decisions, right or wrong, good or bad, expensive and bankruptcy or not. But and granted, he's taken advantage of her. I understand that.
Yes.
But he is approaching her as if, okay, you're an adult. You have the right to make this decision. I'm going to con you.
Yep.
But you have the right to make this decision.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Terrible thing to say about a guy like him.
And he's also under no obligation to reveal her whereabouts. Like, again, this is one of those things where they're not looking for a child that's gone missing. They're looking for a grown adult who has left of her own free will. So yes, you can hire private detectives for, to find a spouse or a person or whatever. But like, if it's an adult, he doesn't have to tell them where she is. As you said, like, he's sleazy and he's awful and he's a con man, but he is approaching her as if she's capable of making her own choices, which is what Jennifer and the Mickey are not doing. So, ugh.
Now we do find,
and then they leave.
In Jennifer's defense, we do find later on that Veronica Kirk has some mental issues. I mean, she can't separate
for sure
the fiction of her movies from reality sometimes, but yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like it's bad enough to warrant the kind of behavior that she's exhibiting, that Jennifer's exhibiting.
Yeah, I don't, and this is one of my questions for later on, but I guess since it's come up now, we might as well go into it. I'm wondering, it doesn't feel to me like Veronica has dementia. It feels more to me that Veronica is an alcoholic, and understandably, she's been through like a lot, that she's drinking so much that she's, as you said, sometimes not able to separate her films from reality because she's, spent so much of her life drunk.
Yes.
But I'm wondering what you got out of that, like whether or not you felt that she had dementia or she just, was drunk so much that it became difficult to separate fact from fiction.
No, I don't think she had dementia, at least not full-blown dementia. And what dementia she had was probably alcohol induced. Now, if she gets herself cleaned up, will the hallucinations or dementia or the inability to separate the fiction of her movies from reality, will that all go away? I don't know, because when you've been an alcoholic for a long period of time, it has a physical effect on your brain, and that has an effect on how your mind operates. And she may have done enough damage to her brain that she still has issues like she currently has. But no, I don't think she's just gone off the deep end simply because she's gone off the deep end. I think she has that alcohol problem. She may have some other emotional issues that need to be dealt with that are contributing, but no, I don't think she's totally mentally incompetent.
Yeah, I kind of got that same impression. So, so they're leaving. this man named Eddie Howell, he's Phil Haver's publicist. He approaches them. He tells them that he knows where she is, and he can tell them in exchange for half an hour to speak with Jennifer and Mickey Prentice. And Laura urges Steele to agree to this deal, and he does, which is an odd, like, this whole situation with Eddie is odd because you can't agree to let somebody speak to your client without your client's permission. Like, that, it's a bizarre thing for him to agree to begin with, because they can't guarantee it unless they, it would have made more sense for Steele to say, okay, well, I'll talk to my client and get back to you. But they're so interested in finding her that they just agree. And then they get to the motel. Laura's about to pick the lock when she, at that moment, she's like, oh yeah, you used to do this. She hands him her lockpick kit, and instead he grabs the bobby pin from her hair. Yeah, motels, no locks. And then, of course, they go in. They find Veronica passed out on the floor. I love her. Who's the dreamboat with the dimples? and that's super cute, as is Steele being like immediately so kind and gentle with her and telling her that he's her biggest fan. Laura goes out to call Jennifer. Veronica begs not to go back. She says Jennifer's only interested in her money, claims someone is trying to kill her. She quotes a speech from one of her movies, which I tried to Google and found out was fake. This is kind of tying into your comments at the beginning about like, why didn't they use real movies? Because that would have made more sense, which I agree. But the thing is, Veronica is convincing enough that Steele helps her escape just as Laura and Jennifer return to the motel. So one question that I have, A, did they take separate cars or a taxi? And B, what prompted Steele to just abscond with her? Like, his instincts, we find out later, are correct, but this is kind of the exact wrong thing to do, unless he's, well, or maybe was it the wrong thing to do? Because again, we've talked about how Veronica is a grown adult, and if she's saying, I don't want to go back, then, I mean, is he wrong to take her out of that situation? I'm not sure.
Is he wrong to take her out of that situation? No, she's an adult, and she doesn't want to go back unless Jennifer has some sort of legal authority over Veronica.
Yeah.
Then no,
and
she doesn't have to take her back.
We know this.
But is he wrong from an ethical business standpoint? I think so, because they were hired to find her, and the family dynamic issues are really not something that they have any authority, any right, any interest in being involved in. But then on the other hand, from a legal standpoint, which kind of back into the first aspect of it, Veronica doesn't have to go back to Jennifer. They would have satisfied their obligation to Jennifer by saying, okay, we found her. Yeah. Here's where she's at. If you want her, go get her. They probably shouldn't have gone there except to verify that she was there. Of course, Laura did bring Jennifer there. So in that sense, Laura kind of did the right thing. But yeah, I mean, that's a messy situation. That's a messy question. Don't ask questions like that.
It's really, sorry. But it is messy because, as we said, she's a grown adult. It's not, we find out later that Jennifer doesn't have power of attorney because when she commits Veronica, then she finally does get power of attorney. So she doesn't have any control over what Veronica does. Veronica is, free to be wherever she wants to be. And then we see, of course, Veronica in the next scene in Steele's apartment, reenacting a scene from one of her films, The Devil's Detour. And again, tried to find it, couldn't, fake film.
Yeah, I did the same
thing. The two of them are just,
it's
these. So, did you? See, yes. This was half of the reason why it took me so long to make these notes was because I was busy Googling these things to try to find out if they were real things.
I did the same thing.
Which is really irritating.
Yeah.
So it's not a real film, but super cute that they're just nerding out on these movies. And this is the point where the part where you mentioned as well, Veronica saying she played opposite some of the near greats like Kane Richmond, etc. And I did Google them and find out that they were real. And I'm like, okay, well, why would you mention real people but not real movies? Like it.
Yeah.
I agree. That part of it is definitely a missed opportunity.
And I do want to point out to somebody, I don't know who, I have some kind of transcripts of the episodes. They are not just literal transcripts. They're kind of narrative, fictionalized transcripts in the sense that they've got narration in them. And whoever did them, I apologize. I wish I knew who you were so I could bring this to your attention privately and personally, but you misspelled Kane Richmond's name. You have it Caine and it's Kane. But I'll forgive you.
I'm sure they'll be relieved.
I know. My forgiveness is so important to everybody.
It is super important. Yeah.
But yeah, Kane Richmond, George Zuko, Sabu. And I do want to jump back because when we were talking about Haver, he mentioned some of the different actresses. Mm-hmm. And of course, the actresses he mentions are actual people, Joan Crawford, Miriam Hopkins.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And he says Zazu Pitts, which according to the actress herself, it's supposed to be pronounced Sezu. So just thought I'd throw that in.
Well, but I mean, that could be further evidence that he's not quite the film buff that he's pretending to be, right? Because he talks about how he ate, breathed, and slept film. And we find out later his father made erotic movies.
Well, so. and his father had to give him his first job because he couldn't get hired anybody else.
Yeah, he gave him his... But I mean, isn't that true of like most multi-billionaire, millionaire, you know, whether you're a politician or a filmmaker or whatever, is that a lot of them get their start by getting their first million from their dad or their, you know, so that kind of felt like another sort of dig at how Hollywood operates, how it's kind of an inside, it's all who you know kind of thing, right?
Yes.
And then Laura shows up. She's absolutely livid. She yanks him into his room. I love that Veronica asks if Laura is his doxy, which it would have been so funny to see her respond if she wasn't so intent on flaying him alive.
Yes.
And then his response is that she's his most forgiving associate, which is great. And then she begins by lecturing him on ethics, which is an interesting way to start because she claims to go by a code of professional ethics, and yet she literally committed fraud to open her agency. So, not sure that's
teacher.
Yeah.
How about withholding of evidence of criminal activity? Palace of Heaven. Ring a bell?
Right.
Or how about investigating a mysterious death where you and nearly everyone else investigating it are suspects? Ethics?
Yep.
Well, we got a little work to do on that one there, Laura.
Yeah, the definition might be a little blurry. And here's the thing. Here's my question here. Could Jennifer Kirk really have her license suspended? Because again, she didn't even want to involve the police, and Veronica left of her own free will. So it's not like Steele took an object or a possession or something that belonged to Jennifer.
Yeah, she could have left on her own. But Jennifer could make the argument that Steele kidnapped her. She's a mentally incompetent old lady, and he knew that, and he kidnapped her. I was here to rescue her. It's all how you frame it.
Yeah, and true. And that kind of leads into the next bit where Veronica pops into the room and basically says, children and old ladies, no, you know, we're both accused of having active imaginations, and no one listens to us and no one believes us. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, but like, again, this show doesn't really do statements, but this feels like a really true mirror to reality, how you get to a certain age or you are young and, you know, sometimes parents don't really sit and take the time to listen to what is upsetting their child or realize that it might feel like nothing to us, but it's everything to them. And it feels like this is the case too with elderly people. And I think it was very interesting that they use this character, Veronica, that Steele admires and reveres for all these movies. And yet she's almost childlike herself in the sense that she, you know, doesn't really know what's going on at any given moment. But she also has the clarity and the wisdom to basically say, hey, I know how people see me, and calls it out, which is kind of cool.
Well,
so,
you know, I think some of it is that there's a lot of times that kids and older people say things that they want to be believed about that aren't true. And so statistically, I guess you could say, people look at it and say, yeah, you're probably lying about this. You're probably just making this up. This is probably just you fantasizing or whatever. So I get it. There's a good argument to be made that much of what they say that is unbelievable because it's not true. But yeah, unfortunately, it's one of those things where people say, well, in 75% of all cases, blah, blah, blah. So they assume that every case is in the 75%. And they never consider the fact that, well, if 75% of these cases are this, then there's 25% that are that. And how do I know? Well, because I've got, I'm a cop and that's the way it is. Or I'm a detective or a medical professional or whatever. And but you've just admitted that there's a possibility that it's something else and you're not even considering that possibility. And that's kind of, I think, what she's also alluding to here. The other thing is that up to this point, she hasn't really offered anything in the way of evidence to support her claim. Now she does. No. She says,
that's true.
Somebody's trying to kill me and I can prove it. Well, okay, now we're talking about evidence. We're not talking about just her saying something.
And that's what gets Laura's attention, because up until that point, Laura is taking Jennifer's line at face value that she's mentally incompetent, not able to, look after herself, and she's doing what she's told. But I wonder, I was thinking about what you're saying and how, for example, with my daughter who's 6, there are times when, we're trying to get her to go to bed, and of course bedtime comes every night, but sometimes it feels like she's not aware of this fact, and we'll come up with every excuse in the book, my pajamas fit funny, or I think I'm afraid of the dark all of a sudden when I wasn't afraid of the dark last night or the night before, whatever. And my husband will say, oh, well, you're just delaying, you're not really afraid of the dark. And I've kind of told him, we need to take the viewpoint that if she says she's afraid of the dark, she's afraid of the dark, but it doesn't mean she does whatever she wants. We just say, okay, well, let's go back into the room and we'll get rid of the monsters, or we'll do whatever. But I think it's important to take them seriously, even if it is that 75%, because then there may be that one day where it's the 25 and we don't, right? So I think that Steele is going with that logic. I'm going to take her seriously until there's evidence that she's wrong. And Laura's doing the opposite. She's the cop going with, well, 75% of the time they are meant, senile or whatever. And it's not until she says she can prove it, as you said, that they decide to take her story literally and go and check into it.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a fact that, or I don't think it's necessarily a case of, well, we're going to believe them no matter what they say and then move on from that based on that assumption. Because even if you assume that it's in the 75% where it's not the case, you can make more progress by saying, okay, well then, if this is the case, let's move forward and analyze this and let's examine the evidence, like the monsters in the bedroom. Okay, well, let's go in, let's turn on the light and let's look and see if there's any monsters in the bedroom. And well, it might be under the bed. Okay, let's look under the bed. And you go through and you demonstrate I don't want to say the untruth, but that's the best word I can come up with at the moment. But you demonstrate that, no, this is not the case, until they have no other option but to accept that it's the case. Of course, and then by doing this, if this is the 25%, you come across something like a bullet hole in the wall to show that, well, maybe there is something here.
Yeah. Well, and then that's what, they go back to the house. Mickey Prentice is there. He takes Veronica inside. There appears to be great affection between them. Eddie Howell shows up just as they're heading into the house to claim his fee. He must have been just hiding there, waiting, because he's literally just, the second they come in, he runs around the corner and it's like, okay, well.
Or he just followed them
Steele is immediately
really close and they didn't see it. And
true, he could have.
He ran up real quick,
And he's like, Steele is just right away in his face, confrontational, not liking the idea of Veronica being seen as just another payday. And I mean, this is obviously one of those cases of Steele connecting with vulnerable people that the rest of society discards. And again, I'm not sure why Eddie thought that they could just let him in someone else's house. Right? Like, they agreed to speak to Jennifer, but they don't have any authority to let him just come in, and yet that's what he does.
Well, Steele here kind of rewrites their agreement because, as you said earlier, Eddie said he wanted 30 minutes with Jennifer and her mother. And here Steele says, I'm aware we agreed to speak on your behalf. That's a different thing entirely.
True.
And then, of course, he concludes that by saying, but now's not the most opportune time. And Laura actually throws this back at him and says, well, no, we did agree to help him.
Yeah.
And since this is hardly the place for a confrontation, she turns his own argument back on him, which smart move on her part. I still think you're right that the agreement was kind of
well, sure, but
wrong.
They can't. It's just weird that they can't, like, they just, he goes into these people's house. Like, there's, I don't know what he thought was going to happen once they got in there if they hadn't already prepped Jennifer to speak to him. If they wouldn't talk to him before, simply getting him in the door isn't going to change their minds. It's only going to make them angrier. So I just thought it was kind of like...
He's a sleazy reporter. He figures it doesn't matter what he does or how he does it as long as he gets the story. And that maybe he assumed that by getting in there with Steele, well, first of all, he could hear what was going on and use that. And then he could apply whatever pressure he had through whatever he heard, picked up on, what he knew from the past to kind of pressure them into talking to him.
True.
I don't know. He's definitely...
that's true. I guess he figured once he was in the door, he could...
He's a haver.
Get them to slip up or say something. Yeah, he is.
He's a haver. It's just he's not in movies. Yep. He's in newspapers.
Yep. True. And I mean, once they get inside, Veronica recounts the attempt on her life. And when Jennifer enters the room, she immediately refers to her mother as a situation that needs to be secured. Again, that really dehumanizing way of looking at her mother. She dismisses her story. Steele points out the best way to see if the story is truthful is to check for the bullet hole. When they find one, Laura sort of inches closer to him, now believing that he might be right. But unfortunately, according to Jennifer, the bullet hole is 30 years old and was a result of her father being murdered in his bed, supposedly for having an affair with a 16-year-old girl. But she seems to get an almost malicious enjoyment from this story.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, it's Jennifer's word against Veronica's.
Mm-hmm.
Period. Like, there's no evidence. The bullet hole is not evidence that they are correct unless they know the scandal already. So I can only imagine that this is due to the fact that, again, Veronica being an elderly woman who is drunk a lot of the time discredits her story. But why do we think, like, why does it seem like Jennifer seems to bitterly enjoy this situation? It seems like she's getting some, like, pleasure out of it almost.
Well, I think that's revealed later on in the episode where she talks about her birthdays and how as the entertainment, her mother would come out and die for her friends, and how at 7, it was kind of cute and funny. At 15, it was pathetic. I mean, can you imagine if you were a 15-year-old and that's the bit your mom would do at your birthday parties? So this is Jennifer really getting revenge. You made my life miserable. I'm going to get back at you any way I can. That's how I read it, is that she hates her mother, and this is her way of expressing it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. It's one of those things where I don't think we've had a client that is this unlikable.
Oh, Mike Ito was pretty unlikable, but in a different way.
True. Well, he was just irritating. Yeah. Like, yeah, she's just so, I don't know, like there's just something about her. But they leave the room and Jennifer locks her inside, and you can hear Veronica screaming to be let out. Even if Veronica is delusional, this is elder abuse. They just leave her there, which I find very strange. I granted Steele and Laura don't have any authority to, like, intervene, but it just feels weird that, you know, like I would think if this were a real life situation, they'd go back to their office and call the police and say, like, you know, this is happening and this woman is being mistreated. But I don't know, maybe not. Instead, they hear a crash. They go see what it is. Mickey Prentice is threatening Eddie Howell with a statue.
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer wants to call the police. Eddie claims that they can't since he was invited. What?
That's kind of pushing it. But
it's still trespassing.
Just because you were invited doesn't mean that you haven't been asked to leave, at which point you're right. It becomes trespass because you're refusing to leave.
And also the people that live in the house weren't the ones that invited him. Like, this is the vampire principle, right? Vampires cannot come in without an invitation. No, but hear me out here, right? A vampire can't come in unless they're invited. So a person that doesn't live in the house can't invite a vampire in.
Who made up that
part
rule?
of the lore. Like,
I've never heard of
I don't know, Bram Stoker.
I've never heard of that.
Really? You've never heard that a vampire can't come into the house if they're not invited?
No.
That's like standard vampire lore. It's in like every vampire film ever.
Okay. I believe you.
So, but yeah, like they didn't, Jennifer did not invite him in. Veronica did not invite him in. Hell, Mickey didn't invite him in. And yet he's like, well, I have an invite. So, you know, you can't tell me to leave. And it's like, A, you don't actually have an invite. And B, it's not your house. So if the people that occupy it are telling you to get out, like, dude, you leave. you know?
Yeah. But, you know, again, this is one of those situations where he's using pressure and leverage because he knows they don't want publicity. Yeah. He knows that they don't want the cops involved. He knows that they don't want negative
for sure.
PR surrounding Veronica and Jessica and Prentice. So it's one of those, I'm going to cause pressure on you. I'm going to cause you as much pain as possible, or the threat of those things until you give me what I want.
Yeah, that's fair. And also, Eddie saes that Mickey was Veronica's stunt double. How?
Yes, I know. That was so funny.
Wouldn't it be fairly obvious that it's a man and not a woman? Like,
It's not unusual. It's not unusual for a man to be a woman's stunt double, a woman actress's stunt double. Maybe less so now because of the union rules or something like that. But in the past, I believe that it was not that uncommon. It may not have been all the time, but I mean, if you've got somebody that has a similar build to the person involved and can be made to look like them, and they have the ability to do whatever the gag is, and somebody of the appropriate gender doesn't, then you go with the person who can pull off the gag and make it look like it's kind of that person.
Well, and that's the thing. It has to be like visually believable. Like, I am a big fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, hence my knowledge of vampire lore. And, you know, the stunt double actress or the person who was a stunt double for Sarah Michelle Gellar for seasons 1 through 4 was a woman named Sophia Crawford. And after season 4, they switched to a different stunt double. And although Sophia Crawford is probably more technically proficient than the stunt double that they switched to in season 5, she doesn't have quite the same build as Sarah Michelle Gellar. So every now and then you're watching a scene or an episode and you're like, oh, Sarah, I can see your stunt double. Like, it's just, you'll have that moment where it's like, oh yeah, that's not her. So I guess you're right. Like, if they can pull off the gag visually, then you go with who makes more sense. And maybe there weren't as many women who were stunt doubles. Maybe that's why in the past you'd have more men doubling women.
I'm sure that's a factor. Yeah.
I guess that could make sense.
Yeah. You know, and we learned some other things from Eddie here, besides the fact that Prentice was Veronica's stunt double. I mean, we learned that after Edgar was murdered, he may have started doubling Edgar around the house and in Veronica's life.
Yeah.
I think I know what that means.
And he does kind of seem like he's a pseudo husband in the sense that maybe Veronica's not actually physically involved with him, but emotionally seems to rely on him in that regard.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things going on. That Prentice, I mean, obviously he has a thing for Veronica. He doesn't say it outright, but he says,
"Oh yeah,
You don't know what she was like then. She was a chrysalis, a nymph made of the finest gossamer, a creature from another world. Yeah, I'm going to say obsessive. Yeah, that's Jennifer's
true.
line. Yeah. But I mean, he's obviously obsessive about her.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and of course, then we learned something about Edgar as well, the late lamented or not so lamented husband. He grabbed at anything with hips.
Not so lamented, yeah.
Mentally and physically abusive of Veronica.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of stuff revealed in this scene.
And it's interesting that her life seems to echo that of some of Hollywood's more tragic starlets like Judy Garland and Marilyn Monroe. And I think that that was kind of intentional, that they created this character who had this past that was full of tragedy, essentially, and that it kind of shaped who she became, which of course it does. Like you've got Carrie Fisher as an example of that as well, who was descendant of old Hollywood royalty, and even Drew Barrymore. We watched Firestarter last night, and you think of what Drew Barrymore ended up growing up with, because that was just kind of like part and parcel of Hollywood at that time, right? So
yeah. Well, and along those lines, I looked up, or I tried to look up, any old Hollywood murder that mirrored what we're seeing in this episode of a husband being shot by supposedly an intruder or a wife or somebody, you know, because they were having an affair with some young teen girl or something like that. And I wasn't able to find anything that was that directly corresponded with the murder we're having described here. But I mean, you know, Hollywood is full of murders, actors and actresses killing each other and that sort of thing. In fact, one of the actors mentioned earlier in the episode was in fact arrested and convicted of a murder. So
yeah. So they go back to the apartment. Steele lights a fire. You can see he's completely deflated, and it looks like he's wrong. Like you don't get that impression.
Go ahead.
I felt that he seemed pretty genuine in his distress at this idea that his actions might have been negatively impacting her and the agency.
I think there is some sincerity in it, but it's got a little bit too much theater about it. It's almost like he's trying to butter up Laura so she doesn't give him the verbal hiding he deserves. Yeah, I think he realizes that he kind of screwed up and that what he did was really out of line and potentially a problem for Laura and the agency. But I think there's some acting on his part here. I just don't buy it 100%.
I think maybe he's always theatrical. Like I think drama queen is in his blood. I don't know. I don't think he knows how to not. It's kind of.
And what is it about drama queens? What is it they do? They make things more than it really is. So again, back to my point, I don't think it's 100% sincere.
I think maybe he was bothered by it because he felt he was taken in a little bit. And he allowed himself to sort of be seduced by this idea that he was protecting Veronica and that he was riding to her aid when she needed him. And I think there's a part of him that feels that need to, like as I said before, protect people who society otherwise doesn't look at, because maybe that was who he was too. But I think, okay, yeah, I mean, I didn't think that maybe there was an ulterior motive to it, but there definitely could be, because this is season 1 and he you know, as she said before in the episode before this, the shortest point between two places is an angle or something like that. So or that might have been in the second episode. But
to bounce it back over to your side and kind of reinforce your position, I think he is a little bit embarrassed about having gone all fanboy. He realizes what he did. He's kind of embarrassed himself in how he behaves around her. I mean, it's like, I've got their bubblegum wrapper. And I think he realizes that is what he has done. And he's embarrassed by it because he doesn't want, he doesn't present himself that way. He doesn't want to present himself that way. You know, he thinks of himself as coming across as sophisticated, and he's anything but he's been anything but sophisticated.
No, he lost all
here.
cool.
Yeah.
He,
Yeah. He's no
he
longer
lost
cool.
all of his cool credentials, and then, you know, um, also stray thought that if we ever come up with merch, we'll have like a t-shirt that says he fits the suit, one that says plausible deniability, and maybe just like a bubblegum wrapper that says Veronica Kirk touched this. I think that would be pretty funny. Just saying.
Hey, anybody that's listening, if you want some merch like we're describing here, let us know. And especially if you're a graphic artist or you have an art talent.
Yeah, if you want to
hit us
design
up.
our merch.
Hit us up and we'll give you a credit on it.
Plausible deniability. And speaking of, I mean, this is a scene where he admits his inexperience. She reassures him that he has wonderful instincts about people. And they almost kiss here. We're 11 episodes in and we still haven't had like a quote real kiss if we're not including the plausible deniability scene.
Can I tell you what jumped into my mind when I saw this scene again?
What? Mildred? Because she always hits my mind when, they're interrupted.
Love Among the Steel. They're always shooting at us when we're kissing.
Oh, yeah. Because we're kissing. Someone always shoots at us when we're, yeah.
I don't know why, but that scene, scene, that line just jumped into my head when I was watching this again.
Yeah. And I mean, on the other end of the phone is Veronica. She tells him that she just did a bad thing. And you see Eddie dead on the bed. Nobody's going to mourn you, Eddie. And Veronica is holding the gun. So
this is another question that kind of leads back into the question of, is she really all there mentally? Because how can you not know if you shot somebody?
Yeah.
It's
well,
one
I
of
think
those things
they were relying on her drinking herself into a stupor.
It could be. All right. Fair enough.
Right. Like, 'cause she drinks so much that, like, if she got blackout drunk, I could see her not remembering, and then she wakes.
Okay.
Although I don't know how they managed to get her standing up holding the gun, but
she's a very good blackout drunk.
She's very, like they rearranged her tableau, and then she, that part is maybe a bit odd, but
anyway,
they get to the mansion, they find Jennifer, but not Veronica, and she explains that they took one look at Veronica and committed her to the ward for the criminally insane. Steele makes the comment to her that she's a very cold woman, and this is the scene where you mentioned where Jennifer explains that cold people are not born, they're made, and describes how difficult her childhood was, those birthday parties where she would die as entertainment. I wonder, is there any sympathy to be had for Jennifer Kirk? As a viewer, I personally don't really have any, but do you find that she's sympathetic at all?
Well, no. I mean, you can sympathize with her her teenage embarrassment over it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
15 years old, your mother is humiliating you. I mean,
she also watched her father get shot.
Yeah. But think about when you were 15. Your parents embarrassed you all the time, I'm sure.
Yep.
Mine probably did too. I don't remember it, but they probably did. Probably most people at 15, 16, whatever, their parents embarrassed them. So we can empathize with that. But the way she has developed and her response to it toward her mother is, no, there's no sympathy. There's no empathy. There's no understanding. Yeah. She's not just cold. She's positively treacherous. She is basically her mother in return. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I agree with that analysis. She's very unlikable.
Yes.
We get to the ward for the criminally insane. Steele and Laura attempt to speak to Veronica. The doctor won't let them. Is this the first medical professional that is actually good at his job? I mean, we know that she's innocent, but he doesn't, and it makes sense not to just let anybody walk in. The morgue attendant offered to let them see, fresh victims in that one episode. Yes. So I think this is the first guy that we've seen that is actually competent.
Yeah. Although, let's go back to the opening part of that scene in what would now be considered politically incorrect. I love the line though. Look, I don't like putting your psychopaths in with tortured schizophrenics either, but Maxwell is up to his armpits and manic depresses him. Nardoff's neurotics are decompensating all over the place. It's like, what? Did somebody swallow a medical dictionary? And it's just like...
It actually kind of made me think of that scene in Arsenic and Old Lace where Cary Grant's character is trying to get his brother committed to the insane asylum, and his brother thinks he's Theodore Roosevelt. And so when he's speaking to the director of Happy Dale Sanitarium, he's the director's like, we've got a lot of Theodore Roosevelts. Is he committed to that? Any chance you can get him to be someone else? And he's like, no. He's pretty much. He's like, okay, well, we'll have to work with it. So it kind of made me think of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a terrible line, but it's absolutely hilarious, which does kind of bring into question the doctor's competence. But you're right. I mean, the fact that he says no, can't let you go in and see him. That is at least somewhat competent. Yes.
It's the closest we've gotten so far, so I'm going to take it.
Okay.
So then we switch over to Phil Haver's office. Laura reads the contract that's sitting on his desk upside down that says he's buying up Veronica's movies. Phil says, "You read upside down. What are you, a William Morris agent?" I Googled this and came up with a Victorian-era poet and designer. So I'm guessing that's not what he's referencing?
No, William Morris is...
I'm assuming this is an American... What is...
William Morris Agency. I didn't look this up. I'm doing this from memory. So apologies to the folks at William Morris if I get it slightly wrong. They are probably...
Disclaimer.
Yeah. Nothing you're about to hear is true. Only the names have been changed. No. William Morris Agency is arguably the largest, the most prestigious, the most influential, at least actors, agents in the country, if not the world. So basically, if you're in Hollywood and you want to hire an actor, William Morris is who you're going to find them through typically. Okay.
It did not come up on a Google search, which I think is very strange. But
that's okay. I'm lazy at internet searches too.
Yeah, well, true. Maybe I was not looking for the... Why are they still looking into this? They were fired.
Veronica didn't fire them.
They're doing an awful lot of work to...
Veronica didn't fire them.
Veronica was never their client.
Well,
I guess you could make an... I guess if she called them... I guess if she called Steele, you could make an argument that she was mainly maybe hiring him. Mm-hmm. But
it could just be altruistic. They see something that's not quite right, and they think that there may be more to the story than they've been getting from Jennifer. I think at this point, they realize that Jennifer is shading the truth quite significantly. And they also realize that maybe Veronica is not fully cognizant of what's happening, but somewhere in the middle, there's a truth that doesn't quite add up to what they've been seeing, what they've been told. And so they're just, maybe they're just feeling that they have a moral and personal obligation to follow up on it.
Well, I mean, Jennifer did lock her in a room. So there is, as I said, something to be suspected in the way of elder abuse, and then committing her to the ward for the criminally insane. So, but Laura says that Mr. Steele isn't convinced Veronica killed him and wants to see Eddie's files to find the motive. Phil says that she doesn't need a motive, that she was nuts, and references Psycho. And when Laura points out that getting her cleared would allow the film to get made, this is when he points out that his father, who appears to have been a porn producer, taught him to always get insurance. So he seems pretty gleeful, as we've, discussed about making money off of the movie, despite not actually making it. Makes me think of, Batgirl, the recent controversy with the Batgirl film, because it was shelved for a tax cut, right? Mm-hmm. And Laura calls him a ghoul, and he warns her to be careful, and he calls her sweetie. And I think this is his biggest mistake, because she points out that profiting off her pain is motive enough, calls him sweetie back. And, he stands up, starts to say, if you were a man, and she replies, if I were a man, I'd have broken your face by now. I don't know about you, but this was a fist pump moment. Good for you.
Yeah.
Because he really is the sleaziest.
Oh, yeah. Well, because Basically, he's admitting here that his only business plan is insurance.
Yeah.
That's his business plan. That's how he's going to make money.
That's gross.
Insurance. Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Ugh. I might be out on a limb here, but it might even be sleazier than Londo, all of what Londo is as a person. If you've seen Babylon 5. But yeah, there's a lot of unlikable people in this episode.
Yes, there are.
That are secondary characters. So they go back to the ward for the criminally insane. This is my favorite scene. Possibly one of my favorite scenes of the entire season. It is hilarious.
Murphy's enjoying this
there is
way
just
too
so
much.
Oh, Murphy. Yeah, he's so good at it, though. Like, he just comes in and he describes this whole thing, and he's like, can we forget the paperwork, and then sticks the bone in his mouth.
I know.
And Steele's... Here, Fido. The whole thing is so beautiful. It's so perfect, and I wish we had gotten more of this. This is what I would have loved to have seen going forward with Murphy, because there's so much potential for physical comedy between these two, and they're so funny when they get put in these situations together, when they're, when Murphy's not complaining endlessly about how untrustworthy he is, when he's forced to work with him against his will, that's when things get really good. Yeah. And also, here's the bit works. Steele gets into the ward. He's immediately surrounded by patients that are legitimately there. Did they realize that what they were doing was extremely dangerous?
I would have thought so. I mean,
like,
maybe not to the degree
insane. These are
maybe not to the degree that it was, but I'm sure that they realized that there was some risk of physical danger there.
There certainly is. If you're stuck in a room full of people who have potentially, are maybe schizophrenic or have murdered people and don't and aren't sane enough to know that what they did was wrong, like that's.
Although, if that were the case, would they be all grouped together in a room like that, or would they be separated? I would have thought they would have been separated.
This is also what I wondered. They weren't strapped down the way Veronica was. They got up.
Yeah.
Which was strange. So you've got, Hey,
can we hop back a second?
Yep.
When Murphy brings him in and he's telling the story, traffic disturbance, Fido decided to chase a bus. And after he says the line about, can we just get him in a cage and deal with the paperwork later? The doctor says something about, seems like the worst ones always come out at night. And Murphy says, well, you know what they say about mad dogs and Englishmen. Mad dogs and Englishmen. Yeah. I looked that up because I didn't know what they said about mad dogs and Englishmen. Did you?
I've heard the phrase because I lived in the UK, but I've never really looked into what it means, like what the background is. Did you find it? I did, and I didn't. Many, many websites that I looked at said that the phrase "only mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the midday sun" is believed to have been coined by Rudyard Kipling, or Rudyard. How do you pronounce that? Kipling. Rudyard Kipling. Okay. Yeah. And the reference that I found, the only reference I found, which actually lists where that phrase supposedly came from, was a poem called "The Ballad of the East and West." Mm-hmm. And there was only one website that even gave that as a linked reference. The problem is it doesn't appear in that poem. There's nothing even remotely similar to that line in that poem. However, weird. It is the title of a song by Noel Coward from the musical A Night on the Town. And weird. I downloaded some audio and I was going to have it ready to play here. But it's very, well, let's see. Let me pull up the lyrics here real quick, because it's kind of it's probably politically incorrect nowadays, but it starts out: in tropical climes, there are certain times of day when all the citizens retire to take their clothes off and perspire. It's one of the rules that the greatest fools obey, because the sun is much too sultry and one must avoid its ultraviolet ray.
And then he goes on and the chorus is, mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the midday sun. The Japanese don't care to, the Chinese wouldn't dare to, Hindus and Argentines sleep firmly from 12 to 1, but Englishmen detest a siesta. And it goes on like this, and it's basically making fun of the fact that the British have got no sense, but it does it in a way that's kind of almost demeaning to people in other cultures and other places. So, I mean, it's one of those backhanded compliment type things, or front-handed insults, or I don't know how you call it, but it's
kind of makes sense for Murphy to say it then.
Yeah. But yeah, it's kind of an insult about you're dumb. But anyway, back to what you were talking about. I'm sorry. I interrupted.
Oh, no, hey, no, I'm glad we went down that rabbit hole because I had no idea where that phrase came from, and I've never heard that song. So we are learning so many things. But yeah, so we're over at Phil Haver's office. Veronica's searching through. Murphy joins them, tells her that Steele does the best Russian wolfhound interpretation he's ever seen, which is odd. I didn't know they had Russian wolfhounds. I know there are Irish wolfhounds, and that Irish wolfhounds would make more sense given where Steele is from. But anyway,
but
he
Murphy,
seemed to genuinely enjoy himself.
Yeah. He looks so right in that straitjacket.
Yeah. Which, I mean, so why did he take the straitjacket off at that moment? Like, why not keep it on just for a little while longer? Because if he keeps it on, then at least he looks like he belongs there. And also, if this is a ward for the criminally insane, wouldn't the rooms be locked? Like, how did he get out? Did he have lock-picking tools on him? Because I would think you have your doors.
He would have to.
Yeah.
Because you're right. They would be locked.
Yeah, because these are people that are theoretically criminally insane. Like, so then he finds her. She's reciting scenes from her films. Like, she asks how he got in. He says, dogged determination, which is a nice little addition there to the whole, the bit.
Yes.
She doesn't remember shooting Eddie Howell. Steele tells her they're going to get her out. And again, we go back to ethics, because if Laura was so worried about what would happen to her ethically by just running off with Veronica in the first place, what does she think is going to happen to the agency after they have broken a patient out of the ward for the criminally insane? Is this the right way to go? Because
how well do you like your private investigator's license? Apparently not all that well.
Yeah.
But, I guess
much.
If you're gambling on the result and the result is a good result, sometimes I guess all that matters is the result, not how you got there.
Well, I mean, so far they've knocked over a museum. They've stolen a famous painting. Like, she doesn't.
Yeah. Ethics?
She seems to gamble a lot.
Yeah. Let's buy her a dictionary.
There's another t-shirt. Ethics? With a question mark?
Yeah.
I mean, I get breaking him in to question Veronica, but breaking her out is the point where they really cross that line. And
yes,
Laura coming in to the hospital, she does a really good, her Millicent Wertner from the State Inspection Board is really good. Like, she really sells it.
Yeah, except those aren't the same glasses.
Of Mildred in like, no, they are not. But I wondered two things. One, if she took the inspiration for this character from the previous episode where she got stuck being Myrtle Groggins, and because dull and plotting, right? And two, if this kind of like not even reminds you because she hasn't shown up yet, but makes you think of Mildred and her like bureaucrat moments.
Yeah, I think Melissa Wertner is probably the quintessential nerd bureaucrat.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Laura was going for, and she did it. Yeah, she pulled that one off.
She was really good at it. Yeah. And then, of course, we've got Murphy dressed as an orderly. He's already in the hospital. They go into the locked ward. Laura insists on he's not a guard, but I'm assuming he's a doctor or an orderly of some sort coming in with them. She plants the thing on the door so that it won't lock, right? Steele sneaks out with Veronica on the stretcher. He doesn't take that device off the door. So I really hope that all of their patients don't escape, because that would not look good for them.
Yeah, that would be another problem for their license.
Yeah. ethics.
Yeah.
And of course, when Steele finds Murphy, right on time, Fido, I've got a bone to pick with you. Brilliant little bit there.
Running gag.
Yeah, it really is. It's good. They get back to Steele's apartment. Veronica's lost in the stars, as he puts it.
Mm-hmm.
Laura points out that Veronica locked up, like with her locked up, everyone gets what they want, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer gets the money. Phil gets to profit off of a picture that never got made.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when Veronica pops up and says that, she first met Eddie Howell 2 months ago. That was the same time that she started to think someone was trying to kill her. And she talks about how interested Eddie was in her life and her background. And again, I think it's kind of sad that the fact that she was so lonely was what made her kind of just open up and tell this total complete stranger
Mm-hmm.
everything about her life.
Yeah.
Right? Like that, it reminded me of my grandmother who would call for like the most random of things because she just didn't have anyone to, or some of the elderly customers that I would have come through my checkout when I worked at a department store called Zellers.
Mm-hmm.
And they would basically just buy like a pack of gum so they could talk to someone, But yeah, so it was kind of sad. And
Now, see, I'll never have that problem because I've got plenty of imaginary friends.
yeah, they're all there. And then Eddie's file only had one name, Joseph Twain. And then they ask
Mark's
Veronica
boy?
whether the name rings any bells, and she says, Mark's boy? Which is kind of funny.
Yes.
And then they go to the address. They're almost shot. Veronica notices her daughter's car racing away from the scene. They find the man in there dead. And again, should be way more blood, but I guess, the blood isn't real on Remington Steele.
Mm-hmm.
And it's revealed to be the police officer who investigated Veronica's late husband's murder, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she tells them that he initially didn't believe their story, had a talk with Mickey, and then suddenly was sweet as pie.
Helped her write the statement.
I wondered, yeah, and I mean, was Veronica really that naive that she didn't realize that Mickey paid him off? It just seems really, he's very hostile at first, then Mickey talks to him, and all of a sudden he's telling her what to say, and obviously it's a lie, because she says she's really, she was genuinely distressed that she had to lie to the police about where she was, especially since it meant claiming she was with Mickey when she wasn't, and that she was a married woman who was faithful even though he was, an abusive jerk. So it just seems like that she should have had more, that she was more aware of the world and should have clued into the fact that the cop got paid off.
Well, I'm thinking two possibilities, both involving alcohol. The first being that her alcohol problem had started prior to this, and that as a result of that, she was not necessarily totally in touch with reality at that point. So it could have escaped her. The other possibility is that alcohol abuse as an older adult, well after this incident occurred, has altered her memories and erased details. Yeah, I'm thinking that alcohol is involved in somehow.
No, I think you're right. I think maybe that's most likely the case, because I was in a car accident in 2013, and it was a multi-car pileup on the highway, and there was a car that was in another accident behind us that had nothing to do with our accident. And the guy attempted to sue us, and it didn't end up going anywhere. But I had to go in and give a statement and answer all these questions, and it was almost 3 years after the fact, and I had a newborn at the time, and I was like, I couldn't remember half of what they were asking me, like position of the car and all this stuff. So I think maybe you're right that if she was drinking, that it could be just that she was relieved to have the cop believe the story they told them, and was happy to take it at face value. Maybe didn't want to poke into it any more than she had to.
Yeah,
which makes sense, right? And especially since she thought she was protecting her daughter. She thought that Jennifer had been the one that killed her father.
And at this point, the way it's set up, we as the viewers jump to that conclusion as well.
Yeah.
That it was Jennifer who did it.
She seems the most obvious.
Yes.
Which is one of those rare occurrences where you're watching the show and you haven't figured out. Because I think most of the time, it's pretty, I can pretty much pick out. I've watched enough procedurals where I'm like, okay, that person did it. But this was a good twist.
Mm-hmm.
And they bring Veronica back to the house. We've got Mickey being really happy to see her. She immediately asks for some rum. Laura has pieced together that Eddie Howell figured out that the brother and the 16-year-old girl never existed and that they lied to protect someone. Well, Mickey paid them off. And Steele, again, he thinks it's Jennifer they lied to protect. Veronica is convinced that Jennifer did in fact kill her husband, which makes sense given that she agreed to lie to the police. And of course, Jennifer thinks that Veronica did it, which might explain some of the hostility. I mean, even if her dad was abusive, she might have still loved him, especially being that young. It's hard sometimes to, parents are the first connection a child has. So she might have rationalized some of it in her head that maybe her dad wasn't that bad or whatever. So, she even points out that Veronica has shot at him before. Yes. And Veronica says, but I always missed. Like,
oh, well, then that makes it okay.
Oof. Talk about a rough, childhood, So, yeah, there's that. And then, of course, Steele asks if they can check the rooms. They accuse her of luring Eddie Howell to the house with the promise to tell him everything and then shooting him. Jennifer says check any room they want. Steele goes to Mickey's room, and immediately Mickey tries to stop him. Now, I know that Steele it doesn't seem like he knew at the end, but I wonder if he had some kind of suspicion, or if it was genuine error that caused him to pick that room first.
Well, I think they were going to probably check all the rooms in the house. And so maybe he was thinking, okay, Laura, you go check that room. I'll go check this one and we'll just work our way. And so he just happened to pick that one. But as soon as Mickey said, Steele, that's my room, I'm sure that the bells went off and said, well, what difference does it make? Because we're going to be inspecting them all, Yeah. And if he didn't have a clue then that gave him a clue. And in fact, that is what clued Laura, because she says, every time we mention Jennifer's name, we mention your name.
Mickey comes up. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And talk about Mickey, dude, what is going on? This is a guy who has pined after a woman for literally pretty much his entire life, who has, he's elderly and still hasn't managed to get her. You'd think that this is the point where you pull up stakes and, find someone else.
or what? At some point you would have thought he had made a move on her. Yeah. But apparently he hasn't.
Yeah. He's like what Murphy could have been if Murphy doesn't come to his senses.
Ooh, that's a terrible sight.
Yeah, right? So, I mean, he obviously Murphy freaks out. He pulls out the gun.
Not Murphy.
Steele tries to grab it. It goes off.
See, you're making the mistake already.
Yeah. What's that?
I said, it's not Murphy that pulled out the gun. It was Prentice.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
See, you're already
Mickey pulls out the gun.
Yeah.
Mickey. They're like the same guy.
just 50 years apart.
Much, much older. Yeah. Mickey pulls out the gun. Steele tries to grab it. It goes off. It doesn't hit Veronica, but of course she pretends it does and falls down the stairs. And when he goes after her, she tells him he's as big a louse as Edgar.
Yep.
So I think that's a fair assessment. Personally.
Everybody in this episode was a louse.
Everyone's awful.
Yes.
Everyone is awful. I mean, I don't think there's been another episode, at least up to this point, and probably not in the entire rest of the series, where everybody involved is a louse. Oof. And then, of course, we get the tag explaining how Mickey tried to convince Veronica someone was trying to kill her in order to keep her from leaving the house. He didn't want Eddie talking to her. And that's and I get a kick out of it when procedurals do this, because they'll have the case gets figured out and then they'll have the tag scene where they're all sitting there and they're explaining it to each other. Mm-hmm. And it's but you were you should know. You were there. This is clearly exposition on behalf of the audience, and it's almost never very well done. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess you could make the argument that there are always holes because this person knew 75% of it. This person knew 75% of it, but it's not the same 75%. So they're trying to fill each other in on that other 25%. So I don't know.
There's a lot of math going on in this episode. I'd like to point this out. Not a fan. So I mean, I think that's it. Unless you've got any other thoughts.
No, that covers it pretty much.
All right. Ethics? ? Subtitle for the episode.
Yes.
Ethics. On the website, www.SteeleWatching.com, show notes, links to Amazon US and Canada. And of course, we've got, I think Psycho is mentioned, and a lot of other stars are mentioned. So I mean, it's funny. It's too bad we can't link to the fake movies that don't exist. But
yeah, too bad. Yes.
Yeah. Also, social media resources such as
the official Steele Watching Facebook page, our official Twitter and Instagram pages, and a link to the Facebook Steele Watchers fan group, which is highly recommended.
Steele Watchers.
Yay! Oh, yep. Can I make one note about the website?
Yeah.
I've discovered this, and I don't know how long it's been the case, that some browsers, when you first go to our website, it will give you this site is not secure warning. I don't know why.
Oh, it's irritating.
I don't know why, but the message is wrong. It is a secure website. I just don't know why it gives that message. But once you go to it and you say, I want to go there anyway, it doesn't seem to ever come up again in that same browser. So if you ever see that message, don't worry. It is a secure website. When you get there, you will see it says HTTPS secure. So
yeah, we're real.
Yeah. We're nuts, but we're real.
We're not just some flashy front person trying to pretend to be a website. Like, come on, who would do that?
All right. So that's the end of this one then, I guess.
And on that note,
the next one is mine. Steele Flying High.
Yep. Steele Flying High.
So.
Yep.
I guess that's it.
That's all we got to say, I think. Yeah. Episode 12, season 1, Steele Flying High. That'll be yours. And we will see you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Who's that?
Oh, that's Cole Howard. Even I've heard of him.
Oh, Cole, darling.
My dear.
I'm so terribly proud of you. Are you happy?
Ecstatically.
And do you love me?
Emphatically.
Will you always love me?
Fanatically.
And do tell me, the show. How do you think the critics will receive it?
Ungrammatically. Well, I see absolutely no chance of us pushing our way through this crowd to our table, my darling, so I think I'd better sing a song. Might pacify the natives.
In tropical climes there are certain times of day when all the citizens retire to take their clothes off and perspire. It's one of those rules the greatest fools obey, because the sun is far too sultry and one must avoid its ultraviolet ray. The natives grieve when the white men leave their huts, because they're obviously, definitely nuts. Mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the midday sun. The Japanese don't care to, the Chinese wouldn't dare to. Hindus and Argentines sleep firmly from 12 to 1, but Englishmen detesta siesta. In the Philippines they have lovely screens to protect you from the glare. In the Malay states there are hats like plates which the Britishers won't wear. At 12 noon the natives swoon and no further work is done, but mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the midday sun. It's such a surprise for the eastern eyes to see that though the English are effete, they're quite impervious to heat. When the white man rides, every native hides in glee, because the simple creatures hope he will impale his solar topee on a tree. It seems such a shame when the English claim the earth, that they give rise to such hilarity and mirth. Mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the midday sun. The toughest Burmese bandit can never understand it. In Rangoon, the heat of noon is just what the natives shun. They put the Scotch or rye down and lie down in a jungle town where the sun beats down to the rage of man and beast. The English garb of the English sab merely gets a bit more creased. In Bangkok, at 12 o'clock, they foam at the mouth and run. But mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the midday sun. Mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the midday sun. The smallest Malay rabbit deplores this foolish habit. In Hong Kong, they strike a gong and fire off a noonday gun to reprimand each inmate who's in late. In the mangrove swamps by the python romps, there is peace from 12 to 2. Even caribous lie around and snooze, for there's nothing else to do. In Bengal, to move at all is seldom, if ever, done. But mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the midday, 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 out in the midday sun.